The November 15th Williamson County School Board meeting is now called to order. Board members, will you please record your attendance? Mr. Mitchell, will you please verify your attendance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am here.
Right. Thank you so much.
12 board members present.
Thank you. At this time, we will have our Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence, and I would like to ask all of our WCS employees who are veterans and our 2 board members who are veterans, Mr. Dan Cash and Mr. Eric Welch, to lead us in the pledge. Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. Excuse me just a minute. I'm having a technical difficulty here. Are y'all okay over there? Okay. We're moving on now to items of particular public interest, which is our public comment portion of the meeting. And to the public that's here, I want to apologize for the delay. We had some other business to attend to. Let me quickly read through the guidance for public comment. We ask, and I'm having technical difficulties with this coming up on my phone again, but I'll just try to wing it here. There's 30 minutes put on the agenda for public comment. Public comment is very important to us, and just as a reminder, we hear from the public in a variety of ways, through email, through this public comment, and then also through meetings and phone calls with constituents. Appropriate business behavior is required and expected at these meetings. We would ask that you not comment and give everyone the respect that you and they want to have if they're making public comment. And we also ask that that you restrict any sort of applause to between speakers, not during a speaker. If you want to be escorted out, please ask a deputy to escort you out, and they'll be happy to do that. And we do appreciate you being here. Let me take a quick check and see anything else, Ms. Osbrooks. Okay, well, we will move ahead. One thing I do need to tell you, we have 24 people signed up tonight, so we will be providing a 1-minute time for every speaker. So if you want to go ahead and set up your phone timers so that you can kind of stay up when your name is called and stay up to date on where your time is, go ahead and do that right now. I'll call up speakers in groups of 4. That way we can move through the speakers a little bit more quickly. And another thing that I need to tell you is while you're keeping your own time, Mr. Casey Haw, who's the board vice chair, will let you know when the time is up. So he's just a double check for you there. Okay, our first speakers are Karen Rail, Alana Truss, Lisa Rooney, and Jennifer Cortez. So, Karen Rail. Go ahead. Yes.
Is it on? Okay.
Yes.
All right, I wasn't going to speak tonight. You almost killed my spirit, just like you are killing our students' spirit for learning, but here I am. Stop the masks. Please stop misleading our district. The federal judge's order has no bearing on whether or not Williamson County Schools has a mandate, only with Governor Lee's recent executive order. You put the mandate in place. You can remove it at any time, tonight even. Your decisions are holding our kids hostage to litigation. At the 7/13 board meeting, you stated, parents are the ultimate decision makers for our child. Parents are the ultimate decision makers for their child, and we want to respect that. You also said at that meeting that you serve 41,000 students, all of whom have individual names, all of whom have individual needs. A blanket mask mandate will never serve the individual student. The actions by one of our board members at Thursday's work session was disgraceful and borderline bullying. Perhaps they need to familiarize themselves with your Be Nice campaign. Do better.
Our next speaker is Alana Truss.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Alana Truss. I have children at Kenrose Elementary and Woodland Middle School. I'm also a clinical psychologist in the community and have the privilege of working with many of our students and families. I want to commend this board for your commitment to addressing 2 essential issues that our schools are facing right now, discrimination and mental health. We certainly have a lot of work to do in both areas, but the shift towards increased acknowledgement of these challenges and the need to more proactively address them is an important step. For students who may be facing these challenges, knowing that the board sees them as important increases the likelihood they will reach out for support. Our students also need to feel that their schools are prioritizing these issues, that school staff are a safe outlet, and that appropriate action will be taken. We need to equip our school personnel as well as our students to know what to look for and what their role is in responding. See something, say something is a great slogan, but it only works if individuals know what those somethings are and they have confidence that something will be done when they speak up. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lisa Rooney.
Hello. The district's stated mission is we exist to provide all students with a quality education that supports their intellectual, physical, and emotional and social development. Research is clear that students do not reach their full potential when they have concerns about their belonging, which is fundamental to well-being and academic success. Prioritizing belonging benefits all students by leveraging the science of learning. Creating environments where students of all races and backgrounds feel they belong requires knowledge, skill, and commitments from adults. It takes courage to acknowledge our blind spots and to implement curriculum and policies that reflect and value the lived experiences of diverse students. It takes willingness, ongoing learning opportunities, and partnership. It won't just happen because we're all well-intentioned, which we are, but it will make our schools better for all students. I'm here to ask the board to, as a starting point, adopt a universal definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion alongside a strategic plan with clear goals and measurable outcomes, and I thank you for that work.
Our next speaker is Jennifer Cortez.
Thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you. I know you don't do this job for the money or the glory, so thank you. 2 years ago, when I became aware of the frequent racial harassment children in our schools were facing, I had a hard time believing it could be true right here in this beautiful place with a church on every corner, with our excellent schools, with our thriving business community. But I wasn't hearing these stories from a secondhand media outlet. I was hearing them from local parents and local children in face-to-face conversations. And that's why I'm here asking you tonight to continue the work you've started and to continue to take reasonable steps to make our schools safe for all of our students. So we can learn how to handle race-based harassment, so we can get some accurate and consistent reporting systems in place, so we can standardize discipline and make it fair across the board. Looking out for each other isn't a liberal or conservative thing to do, it's just the right thing to do. Thank you.
Our next 4 speakers are Stephanie Murphy, Nick Schreiber, Dave Crouch, and Michael Miller.
Wit and wisdom demonstrates the lack of values with the lack of source documents. Within 6 years, this will deconstruct family values and minds with negativity and dark thoughts. Who will be there to pick up these pieces? And the counseling. The studies I present to the committee demonstrate the lack of negative emotion words, not the abundance of positive words that explain better mental health. Trauma to a child's emotional state will affect their emotional intelligence and well-being. This is my son last year, and during Ruby Bridge, the visible pain he is bearing, during quarantine for 4 hours, he could not talk about her anymore. He said he could handle shark attack. 2 weeks in, we had vomiting, stomach pains. He now sees a counselor, like I said, diagnosed with exceptional emotional intelligence. He may not remember the material, but he can tell you the emotion. Is this what wit and wisdom is meant to do? We consider him advanced, but maybe it's a disability. Obviously, you're not allowed to isolate a child with disability, so why are we opting him out? That's isolating him. I dealt with a suicide myself this weekend. My husband, who is a commander in the Army, has had multiple calls. We don't bring it home.
Time. Nick Schreiber.
Ma'am, before I start, I got 2 requests real quick. The secretary could answer. Can I switch with one other speaker and let her go first?
Not at this time, sir.
Okay, then I needed to ask one more thing. Give about 10 seconds or so for any children watching or anyone in here that can't handle offensive.
Sir, there's no profanity. We
I'm
respect
just gonna-
business
I'm just gonna read
decorum.
I'm going to read what's in a book in 5 schools that is in our school system right now.
Okay.
And I just like to say that if you have kids, you probably want to move them out of the room for a minute. Is that okay?
That's fine with
Give
me,
a
yes.
few seconds for
Yeah.
them to. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
As I said, this book is in 5 schools here in Williamson.
Our next speaker is Mr. Dave Crouch.
The audio cut out on the online feed.
Okay. Thank you.
On a brighter note, I just want to read a letter from my son, who's a freshman at Mississippi State this year, to Mr. Tim Sawyer, who's a teacher at Centennial. I'm currently a week and a half into the Building Construction Science program at Mississippi State University. Right from the beginning, I've been constantly reminded of how much the 4 years in your program have and will help me with my profession. Skipping on down in the interest of time, as many have struggled to comprehend the types of drawings and what to do, I've had no problem getting started and knocking these drawings out of the park. My elevation got voted top 3 in a class of 57. Professor Carson stated this is one of the best elevations that we have ever gotten this early in the course. On down, I say all this not to brag, but to thank you all for how serious you took your class and how much time you put into making sure your students get the most out of your course to the point that it abundantly prepares them for their college major. Without your course, I would be struggling to get by, but instead
Time.
I'm having fun and enjoying furthering my knowledge of building construction science. And he goes on.
Thank you.
Tim Sawyer's awesome.
Michael Miller?
We good?
Ms. Birdsong?
Madam Chair, Ms. Birdsong would be in the back.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Michael, go ahead.
Okay.
Mr. Miller, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. Much of the chagrin of both parents and board members alike, there are no defined thresholds or metrics for decisions on masking. As such, we really need to default to the reason for the mask mandate that was decided back in August, that children were too young to be vaccinated. Parents at this point deserve a reasonable opportunity to have our kids vaccinated in that age group before the mask mandate ends. Wonderful story that as of November 5th, our kids can be vaccinated. It's a 5-week cycle, though. Let's keep that in mind. Until that 5-week cycle is complete, they are not fully vaccinated. So reasonable compromise is in order at this point. What I'd like to suggest is that any child who begins her vaccination schedule by December the 1st will be fully vaccinated by the start of the second semester. So the goal tonight, let's keep the mask mandate through the end of this first semester and start the second semester anew. Give our students, please, give our students and our parents a reasonable opportunity to get our kids fully vaccinated before the mask mandate ends. Thank you.
Our next 4 speakers, Natalie Showalter, Kate Keese, Sharon Kinzer, and Ravita Rockman.
This is going to be gruesome. Sorry. This is Homegoing by Yaga C, and it's on the Savas recommended list in multiple high schools. Like, my heart is beating so fast, and I'm going to blush. When the men started to harass Willie, a female character, she spit in one.
We are not muting the feed here, folks. Please go ahead. Next speaker, Kate Keese.
Hi, everybody. My name's Kate Keese. I have one child at Brentwood High, and my oldest graduated from there in May. First, I want to thank Superintendent Golden and all of you board members for all that you do and for engaging Fostering Healthy Solutions and for your serious consideration of the best way to implement some of their suggestions. It seems to me that the work of Fostering Healthy Solutions is like preparing for Thanksgiving dinner. We want to make sure that everyone is considered, that everyone has a place, and that everyone feels welcome. I've taken several courses through my church over the last year and a half exploring our country's history and legacy. There's much I didn't know, and at times it's been uncomfortable to learn. We have come to believe that we should avoid discomfort, but discomfort is how we grow. Taking the steps outlined in the plan from Fostering Healthy Solutions may be uncomfortable, and we will learn where to add another chair and how to make a new dish to welcome another person at the table. Because there is enough,
Time.
and we are always better when more of us
Time.
are gathered. And welcome.
Sharon Kinzer.
Hey, good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Sharon Kinzer. I'm a native Middle Tennessean. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from the book Crank by Ellen Hopkins. She has several inappropriate books that are found in multiple Williamson County high school libraries. This particular one, I've got a reading sample from Crank. Her books contain graphic pornography, violent sex, and drug abuse. Just relax, you'll love it. My brand new Victoria's Secret shredded, and I felt the
Here is Ravita Rockman.
Sorry. I wanted to talk to the board today. One of the things that concerns me is the issues that we continue to have. When a little white girl feels bad about being white, our legislators and the world moves for her. Laws are generated, credibility and trust in teachers is removed. But what about the kids of color who experience discomfort? Do they matter? At the last meeting, I reported 4 incidents of kids I know that had been called the N-word on the school bus. Since the last meeting, One Wilco has been made aware of more situations and students feeling unsafe and unprotected. One was racial bullying from an elementary school where a parent removed their child. Another elementary kid was called a slur and their friend reported it. And finally, a kid was called, in middle school, was called the N-word by someone he didn't know. School board, please continue to have these conversations and find solutions for a safe district for all of our students. Be the example on doing what's right. We're all in this together. But in these situations, the schools were proactive in getting, one school was proactive in getting involved, and the others not so much. Thank you.
Our next 4 speakers are Christy Bittinger, Maya Neely, Mike Proctor, and Kristen McKinney. Go ahead.
Ready?
Sure.
I'm the little person, I guess. Good evening. I am Christy Bittinger. I am a mother to a 5th grader at Edmondson Elementary and part of One Wilco. In 2019, I read the story of the 2 Sunset Middle School teachers that had an assignment where students were asked, imagine you were a slave owner. I had to read the story a couple times and still couldn't believe what I was reading. Then to learn recently that the same school also had a white students forming a wall preventing black students from passing. It gave me a wake-up call to do a deeper dive into the multiple examples of hate, racism, violence, minority students in Williamson County schools students have faced. This past summer, I participated in the Fostering Healthy Solutions listening session and heard multiple stories of racism aimed at our students. This problem is touching every one of our communities, Black, Hispanic, AAPI, queer, and Muslim. When Superintendent Golden and the entire board came together and brought in Fostering Healthy Solutions,
Time.
Okay, thank you.
Maya Neely.
Good evening. My name is Maya Neely, and I'm a pediatric hospitalist and a mother of children in Williamson County. And I want to thank you first for your hard work. I know that we are navigating through very difficult times. The CDC and other tracking websites still show that we have substantial spread of COVID within Williamson County, and just over the past 2 weeks, student cases within our county have approximately tripled, from 24 to 74. At a time when vaccines are just becoming available for elementary school children, the winter season is upon us, requiring us to spend more time indoors, and there are back-to-back holidays with people traveling out of our community to be with family and friends. It feels like any decision to withdraw the mask mandate would be premature. Each person has their own individual risk comfort, but you all have been tasked with thinking about what risk you want your entire community to accept. And not only the healthy children within it, but the ones who have underlying conditions, younger siblings, and family members sick with cancer at home. I ask that you please continue to consider that as you make your decision today. Thank you.
Time. Mike Proctor.
Good evening. Congratulations on cutting the feeds of everybody that's actually trying to present some truth here tonight. It's very, very nicely done. This is from Tricks, another book found in multiple Williamson County school libraries. Quote, I met more than one pervert, but I never let them do me. Nope.
Since you guys won't be able to go back and watch the replay of this, I've created handouts for you all of everything, which contains way more than what's in here. You can also go to kbeezy.com, and you can see all of this as I begin cataloging it. The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls is on the Savas recommended reading list. It's also one of the 3 books a teacher can trade out to teach in the classroom. It's in multiple high school libraries, including 29 copies at Summit, which 27 of them are in an English language classroom. How about this? Mom, Uncle Stanley's behaving inappropriately, I said. Oh, you're probably imagining it, she said. He groped me and he's wanking off. Mom.
Our next speaker is Megan Hine.
Continuing in that vein, Traffic is the sequel to Tricks, another book by Ellen Hopkins, seems to be a favorite author in our high schools. This is in multiple high school libraries.
Speakers is Adrian King, Daniel Heimerly, Jen Baker, and Shannon Hill.
Go ahead. Marie, sure. Okay. My name is Adrian King. I'm a Page Middle and Page High School parent. I'm a proud member of the Franklin High School class of 1992. I appreciate the opportunity to lend my voice in support of the district's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. It is all too easy for those who benefit from inequity to fail to make equity for all a priority. Our children will be entering a global workforce and will need an empathetic understanding of DEI. I strongly and proudly support a public school system administration that is willing to teach what children need to know to become contributing members of a global society. As a school system, I understand the expert opinion on DEI was requested and received. Please now follow the recommendations of the experts, not the opinions of uninformed parents who believe they somehow benefit from the current lack of DEI initiatives. Thank you.
Daniel Heimerly.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to share personal experiences related to the vaccine mandate. I think I was hoping that we could get together today and actually celebrate the lack of that, and I guess that's not going to be the case. But what we hear as parents is that we should be okay with a vaccine mandate because they exist already. And I was having a conversation with a public health expert, maybe we would call them, and they were, explaining to me that, kids get sick from COVID. There were 63,000 hospitalizations from COVID last year. And I think the thing that they leave out is that there were 9 million others for other respiratory issues, and that COVID is actually not even on the top 10 list of hospitalizations for young children. And it kind of begs the question, all right, if the flu vaccine, for example, the CDC says our kids are safer if we actually mandate the flu vaccine versus the COVID vaccine. Actually have a significantly higher impact on the hospitalizations.
Time.
Okay, thank you.
Jen Baker.
So I've got another book called Later, Greater. It's another one by Lauren Miracle, and it is in multiple high school libraries. If you have seriously, take it out.
Our next speaker is Shannon Hill.
Good evening. Masks do not work. Those of you that have continually voted for this mandate have been using our kids as pawns in your political agenda. The insanity needs to stop. I hope recommendations from Mr. Golden, as stated last Thursday, will be an end to this mandate for all grade levels. The vaccination status of students should not be a factor in this decision. The vaccine only protects yourself, not others. You've played these games long enough and you lied to us long enough. There is no federal mandate, as has been stated in numerous WCS email communications. This mandate was passed by members of this board and this board alone. Your statements try to make parents believe your hands are tied in this matter while taking no responsibility for the current mandate. Based on your flat-out lies and disregard for the truth, our trust for most of you is gone. You are all elected to make decisions in the best interests of our children as a whole, not yourselves, and you have failed at this time and time again. Stop the games, stop the lies, end this ridiculous mandate.
Our last group of speakers, Shelby Rollins, Julie Nimmons, and Marissa Diplock.
Who was first?
Shelby Rollins. Okay.
I've got more to say.
Julie Nimmons and Marissa Diplock, please.
Thank you very much, and I consider it a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak. I had an opportunity last Thursday night to listen to your working session. You all had a very long day and an even longer evening. I appreciate the work. I also heard a great deal about the rapidly and staggering increase in mental health issues facing children in our district. I also heard concern about the ability to find enough school psychologists to come in and help with this issue. What I did not hear, and what I hope you will consider, is taking some time out and getting to the root of the issue instead of just trying to treat it only. Please do some work. take some time, find out what is the basis of these issues. Why are these children suffering? Because unless we can get, and unless you do get to the root of these issues, they will only continue, and just throwing other help won't solve the problem.
Our last speaker is Marissa Diplock.
In a matter of weeks, you, the board, will be bestowed the task of making the final decision on the outcome of the Wit and Wisdom reconsideration. As you know, upon the panel's announcement, we will have 15 days to submit an appeal to you if we find the outcomes unfavorable. I'm here to ask you, the board, to take steps to fix an issue of this issues with this entire process. Only one board member on this board can truly understand or comprehend the issues, as only one member of this board actually sat on the panel. Upon the panel's announcement, I ask you to arrange a meeting with all plaintiffs together with yourselves so that we can have an open discussion, asking questions and listening to answers. Without this kind of communication, you do not have enough information to make an informed judgment on these findings. This process was lacking on so many fronts. Again, I ask you, the board, to meet us in the middle, face to face. Let's do this. Let's make this happen and show that you actually care.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment for tonight. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break so that those folks who want to leave can go leave, and then we'll move on with the rest of our business. Thank you, board members. We'll move to our next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve? Mr. Welch makes the motion to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Galbraith makes the second. Any discussion? I see no discussion. Board members, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell, how do you vote?
I vote in favor of the agenda, vote for the agenda.
Oh. I think we need to keep going.
I'm sorry, did you not hear me?
Yes, we did. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. King,
I just know.
we would just show him absent for this one motion.
Yeah, I can put him. Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board members. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. We have a motion to approve? Mr. Welch makes the motion. Mr. Brown makes the second. Board members, any discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Wimberly, your vote's still in process.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board members. With that vote, you approve the October 18th, 2021 school board meeting minutes. You approve the recommendation for field trip fee requests. You approved Independence High School athletic lockers. You approved the LEA compliance report, and you approved the 2021-2022 hearing officer list. We now move on to the next agenda item, communications to the board. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, board members, for attending the work session. As you all know, we did have quite a long work session on Thursday and had a lot of discussions related to a number of items. Of course, the items on the agenda plus my superintendent's report. I do want to hit and talk briefly about 3 items tonight. One, the mask requirement that currently stands with the school board. I want to give you a little bit of a history of where we are. Really, the most recent history related to that. As you know, at the work session, I mentioned that I intended to recommend on Monday night that we eliminate the mask requirements absent something extraordinary. Based upon that, we also talked about the state bill that might have been signed by the governor at some point prior to tonight's meeting, and that bill was signed by the governor on Friday. As a result of that bill, the mask requirement that the board had previously voted on became inconsistent with state law. And based upon that, we issued a notice on Friday to our families that we were no longer under the mask requirement. Over that time, over the weekend, there was actually a separate federal lawsuit filed against the state of Tennessee. We are not a party to it, but the federal judge issued an order Sunday afternoon enjoining the enforcement of that state law. So we went from Friday to the state law applying to us and no mask requirement to Sunday where that state law was enjoined. And we were back to your board vote, which up to this point included a requirement for masks through January 18th after the January meeting. So As a result of that state action and that federal action, we actually sent 2 notices out 2 days apart about where we are. As part of that new lawsuit, the federal judge held a hearing today, and our litigation counsel actually attended that federal hearing. As part of that, the judge today, in that case against the state related to that state law, announced that they were to have a hearing this coming Friday on that state law. And actually, during that time, and you may have already seen some secondary news reports, because some media members were there at the hearing, the judge asked our litigation counsel to approach. And they talked about our issue because the federal lawsuit against Williamson County Schools and Franklin Special School District as co-defendants with the state is still pending under a temporary order where the governor's Executive 84 allowing for an opt-out is currently enjoined. As part of that discussion, we ended up having an attorney-client meeting just a few minutes ago prior to our board meeting. And if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Birdsong announced to the public and posted on our live stream and on the public educational and government channel where your meetings are broadcast that there was a delay in starting this meeting because we were having that attorney-client meeting. As a result of that meeting, our litigation counsel recommended that the board defer item 6A, which is on our agenda, the COVID mitigation strategies, until after further guidance from the court is received, based on that Friday meeting. And so I wanted to make sure everyone is aware that our litigation counsel has recommended that, and I intend to make that recommendation to you when item 6A occurs. I will tell you, like I told you on Thursday, I'm encouraged by our numbers going down. I know that you all have received requests from members of the community that span the spectrum of recommendations based on their experience and their thoughts. But again, our litigation counsel has recommended we defer till there is additional information related to that hearing. Second, I do want to talk about our curriculum review, and I want to thank the folks for speaking to issues related to library books and our curriculum. We do have a board policy that describes the process for requesting reconsideration of instructional materials. And number one, I want to encourage anyone who has any problem with any book to submit that request. We have gone through this process a number of times over the years, and the board has, for a number of years, had that process in place, and I asked that if there's any question, please follow it. There is in some of our books profanity. That's sometimes there. A few years ago, the novel To Kill a Mockingbird was challenged. That includes profanity. That includes depictions of bad events. This process can work, and so I again encourage folks to do that. Right now, a number of our families are going through that process with Wit and Wisdom, asking that Wit and Wisdom be reconsidered, and a number of books are specifically challenged. We have on our website, in our ELA web page, a lot of information related to that. We have every book listed that's being reconsidered. We have a timeline related to that process, and we have some frequently asked questions. I encourage folks to go to our academics tab, scroll down to English Language Arts, and that information is there. As part of that, the review committee placed that timeline there, and the last date entry on the timeline was November 10th, which included a continuing review of fourth quarter materials. As you know from our work session, the committee anticipates that within the next few weeks they will provide you their conclusions. Either anyone challenging that or anyone interested that can appeal their decision within 15 days, and then it is to be reviewed by you, a board, at the next meeting. And again, we went through the details of that at the work session. So we do look forward to receiving some detailed decisions from that committee in the next few days. It is very important for us to do right by all our students, and we know that individuals can differ on what that means and how that is handled. Because of that, we have that structure in place that has parent representation, teacher representation from our Education Association, board representation, and representation from an administrator at that grade level. As part of that, however, ultimately you all, as the board, are the final decision maker on that. So I do want to remind you to expect that in the next coming meeting. Finally, I do want to mention a third item that we discussed at our Thursday meeting. Like so many other employers in Middle Tennessee, we have a number of positions that are not filled. We have staffing challenges. We spoke to specific challenges related to teachers, teachers' assistants, cafeteria workers, et cetera. I want to thank those folks who are volunteering. I know some of you have volunteered in the cafeteria to help out, and we know that Middle Tennessee is a growing place where people want to be. We've experienced that here with growth here in Williamson County Schools. And I want to continue to do that call out for those of you who want to work in the school system and help. What we have heard is that there are a number of folks who prior to COVID didn't really have to work, but chose to. And many of those have left the workforce because of COVID and might not have come back. If you're in that position and want to do some good work, we invite you to come back and come back for Williamson County Schools. As part of our planning, we are currently brainstorming over some interventions we can do to help improve our staffing based on market conditions. I anticipate that in January we'll have some recommendations for you as a result of that. For new teachers, we do have hard to fill signing bonuses, et cetera, but right now, especially with teachers, every school system in Middle Tennessee is struggling and trying to brainstorm ways to attract teachers when we have a limited pool of teachers. So that continues to be a challenge for us. With all that said, Madam Chair, I'm certainly open to any questions. The next sub-item on the agenda is Carol Birdsong with our student, staff, and spotlights.
Okay, Mr. Golden, Ms. Birdsong, before, I do think there are some questions about your report. Would you like to address these now, or?
Sure, I think that'd be appropriate.
Okay, Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Golden, we have had complaint after complaint on these texts and books that are in the schools, high schools, middle schools. I have spoken to Mr. Allen, and according to him, he has looked at some of them and pulled some of them. This is, and I hope you get a copy of this, Mr. Allen and Ms. Webb. These are more books. This isn't foul language. I mean, this is getting into it pretty deep. I mean, what are we?
I'm sorry. Board member, there's distractions in the audience. Go ahead, Mr. Cash.
What are we teaching? What are we, teaching? I had a gentleman confront me the other day. He said, I took my child's Chromebook and went through the whole thing. And this is a middle schooler. He said 50% are video games. I know there's protections on our computers, big time. But when you can go to the library and check out a book, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And the policy that we're using for wit and wisdom takes way too long. The books that are in question, the staff and everyone else knew about them last year. They were told about them. They were listed. I was even told in one instance I believe the River Between Us that talks about prostitution in 5th grade. We were just wanted to make sure it was historically correct. Historically correct to talk about prostitution, one of the oldest professions known to man. What are we doing? Why are we teaching this stuff? We're teaching stuff to children that don't understand, cannot understand. The breeding of seahorses, for crying out loud. That was just the other day. You know, going over the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the things that changed our nation then, that people have worked so hard to do, and teaching 2nd graders, things they can't understand. 3rd grade. What about George versus George, Hatchet, all of them? Everything in these books is dark and negative. We are pumping negativism in these elementary kids, and now there's a whole nother group out there showing us, not asking us to look this stuff up, but showing us where it's at. And nothing can be done? I just don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. And, I mean, we can put a motion on the floor that we investigate this, but you're going to tell us just to go to policy. This is taking way too much time. And teachers, I apologize to teachers because this just falls right in their laps on everything. We talk about teachers being depressed. I would be depressed with what they have to do and what they have to go through. I just want to make sure these copies get around there, if you will. But something's got to happen a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, so folks know what to do, pull their kids out of the schools or whatever. Thank you.
Ms. Cleveland?
Thank you, Mr. Cash. Thank you, Mr. Cash. Obscenity is not appropriate in schools. You spoke to 2 items as I understood your comments. The question of obscenity, and then a second question related to wit and wisdom. I spoke to the process of wit and wisdom. I will tell you that when we talk about the work of teachers, they do an incredible job.
They do.
They are professionally trained in their college classes. They are professionally trained on issues related to obscenity. That's part of what they learn in college. And so, again, thank you for mentioning the list. We will make sure our staff looks at that. But again, I do want to emphasize, anytime a parent has a concern about a book, submit the request. We do, through our professionals, eliminate and make decisions on books. But we also encourage parents to do the same thing and submit those to us.
Ms. Cleveland? And audience, may I remind you there is no speaking out during this period of time? Thank you. Ms. Cleveland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that we have a process for curriculum and for reconsideration, and the process does take long based on our policy. But what about the library books? Because library books aren't part of the educational process. And so personally, I don't think that should follow a policy route because it's a library book. It's not in the kids' curriculum or their education. So is there a faster way we can vent library books to get out versus, because it's not something that they're...
Thank you for that. So number one, our librarians and our instructional staff do make decisions when they purchase books. There are thousands of books in a library. If it is determined that there is an obscenity in there, then those are removed. We actually do the same thing, and we have done the same thing with the curriculum process. Mr. Cash actually mentioned one book that was actually in the Wit and Wisdom curriculum where our administrative staff removed it pending investigation, and it was more than simply historical accuracy that they were reviewing. So we have multiple routes. We have our professional staff review, and there are times where they remove particular books. We also have that process for individuals, any citizen in Williamson County, to make a request in addition to our staff review. I do think, given the questions you've asked, it is appropriate for us in a subsequent meeting to speak to this at a work session, to give you all detail about the process we go through with our library books.
So just a clarification then, not all books in the library curriculum books though, correct?
Oh, that's true. The majority of library books are not part of the curriculum for all
And
students.
those are the books I'm talking about that aren't part of the curriculum, that they're just there for the kids' readings. And on those, how those are vetted and how quickly, if we find something, do they really have to go through that same long process? Because we're not dealing with a curriculum, we're dealing with just a book that's on the shelf that may need to be removed because it slipped past the vetting process.
So, again, our professionals have the power to remove a book, whether it's in a library or within curriculum, and we have done it both ways based on that professional judgment. Dr. Allen and his staff work with the grade level supervisors to review those items that are challenged.
Mr. Galbraith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, do we have any record, or how do we track if there, first, have we tracked any requests for I don't know what it's called, if it's reconsideration of library books, or if it's more of an informal process, but have the books that were read along tonight and along with maybe along with others, have you had any requests for review of those library books this year?
I'm not aware of any requests for reconsideration, but we do have conversations from time to time with parents or grandparents or any citizen who ask. Recently, we have had a review and a reference to a list of online library books. We actually post every library book, the name of every book that we have in our libraries. And so from time to time, we do have questions related to that, yes.
So, because I believe, and I haven't gone back through my email, but I believe we got a list of a complaint with a number of books on it, and I think I can't remember if it was you or Dr. Allen that said, we've got, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of books in our library. So I guess so these people have gone through and have identified somehow. There, like you said, there might be if the titles are online, they can identify which schools the books are in. But what's the appropriate way for them to voice that complaint?
So step one, if they want it out, it is always appropriate to submit a request for reconsideration. That is always appropriate.
Is that under the existing policy?
Yes, sir. That is under the existing policy. Also, we encourage them to speak with their principals, their librarians, Dr. Allen's staff. To your point, you mentioned formal versus informal. That is less formal, and they can certainly do that and have those conversations with Dr. Allen and his staff.
And I've gotten multiple reports that the live stream was selectively muted as these people were reading, and so I guess I just would ask for you to review if it happened. I haven't had a chance to look at any of the videos, but I suspect we'll see some in the coming days. But I will say, if we are muting people and censoring the public comment of books that are in our library, that's not a very good look. So,
thank you for that.
Just to clarify, Mr. Galbraith, I have not muted anyone from up
No,
here.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying, I'm not saying you do. I'm saying it's only on the live stream.
Yeah, I
So-
know. I've already gotten emails that
Yeah.
asking me about that, so I want to make sure we clarify it in the meeting. Mr. Brown?
So just to pick up on that point, can we definitively answer the question as to whether that live stream was cut? I'm asking the.
Ms. Birdsong is looking up.
I'm asking the staff. I'm asking the
Just
staff.
one moment, please. Audience, I would love for you to be able to stay at this meeting, but the next person that talks out, deputies, please escort them out. Thank you very much. Please continue.
Mr. Brown.
One moment.
Board members, I made that decision as we were directing, and we had speakers come to the podium saying that that whatever they were going to speak was offensive. We had to make that decision because we are broadcasting, and we are broadcasting under FCC guidelines, and I'm not going to take that risk with the county government's education access channel, so I take responsibility for taking that action.
And there is a 5-second delay because we are broadcasting with FCC. So, there's not a 5-second delay.
No,
Okay.
there is no delay.
There is no delay.
That's why
That's
we
why
muted it. We have no way to control that if someone were to say something inappropriate. So I don't know what was said, but when people came up to say that they were saying things that were going to be inappropriate, I made the decision to mute it.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, this is the first I recall in my experience with the district where that question came up, where somebody notified that they might be saying something. That deserves us to review our process, double check the FCC rules, evaluate the difference between the written word and the spoken word, and the nature of the audiences. So I'll make sure that we do a review of that process.
With that being said, though, obviously, board members, you were able to hear all of the public comment, and the public comment is for you, board members, as the elected officials.
Mr. Cash?
I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, do you need to continue? Let me go back.
Can we?
There you go.
Can we also, either right now or later in the meeting, if it takes some research, confirm whether, in fact, the books that are part of this packet that was handed out are actually on library shelves currently? Can we confirm that?
We will certainly do that. I'll make sure that Dr. Allen's staff does that in review. We do have an electronic record of all our libraries.
I just would say, I'm sure there are others, but I for one would be concerned if these books were in our libraries based on what I've read in the packet, and I certainly appreciate the people bringing that forward. It's troubling, to say the least. And I think, to Jay's point, if we're going to make a decision to censor or mute comments that are coming directly out of books that we are putting in our library shelves, we should rethink kind of our approach on that. And I know you said you would, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to, I didn't really get a good answer from Jason when Jay asked him if they had any correspondence about these books. I will answer that, and I have correspondence if anybody wants to see them. It's out there, and Mr. Allen knows about it, and he's trying to work in that area. He assured me of that. And so, yes, staff is very well aware of what's going on with these books. Thank you.
And if I may to follow up on that, I can't speak to any particular title, but I do know that Dr. Allen and his staff is looking. And one of the focus points we have is making sure that that list is available. And I'm encouraged that we're getting questions related to that. That emphasizes that we are making sure everyone knows. So I do want to thank those who brought that up, so that, because it is important for parents to know what is available for their children.
I see no further discussion. And with that, we'll move on to the student, staff, and school spotlights with Ms. Birdsong.
Thank you, and thank you guys for your patience. You have been waiting a long time to be honored. We are going to start with our perfect ACT composite score students. So, Mr. Kydell, if you will come forward. This is Alex Wilson. Alex is from Brentwood High School and earned a perfect composite score on the ACT during the October testing period. All right, very good. You've got your paperwork there. Our next honoree is Liam Smith from Centennial High School. Liam could not be here, but here you go, Dr. Dyson. Dr. Dyson will deliver that. Liam earned the perfect ACT during the September testing period. And from Independence High School, and unfortunately no one could be here from Independence, but this is Alexandra Hasmir, and scored the perfect composite ACT score in October. Congratulations. Next, we have Ravenwood High School, and Lana, come on up. Lana Cartaylor, did I do that right, Lana? Okay, great. And Dr. Vaden. There you go. Lana earned her perfect composite score in the September testing period. Turn around and get your picture made right there. Very good. Congratulations, Lana. And Chase Featherling. Chase is not here, but Chase is a student at Renaissance. So Mr. Bass will be sure and get that to Chase. And Chase earned his perfect ACT composite score during the October testing period. Now we are turning to athletics. And this is the Nolensville High School volleyball team. They are coached by Brett Young. This is the third consecutive state title for Nolensville High School, and this is the first year that they earned it in 3A, which is the largest division. So they moved on up. So congrats to Nolensville. And so exciting, for the first time ever in school history, the Page High girls brought home the state soccer championship. Their coach is Nate Clapp. And we're moving into cross country. Second year in a row for the Brentwood girls team, won in 3A. Rob Paltinitz is the coach for the Brentwood girls. And we have a Ravenwood individual champion. His name is Miles Raymer, and he won the individual medal state championship. His coach is Pete Mueller. Congratulations to all of our state champions and our perfect ACT students. You guys, thank you again, and feel free to take your leave. Board members, as they're leaving, I hope you saw your shirts that are by your seat. We, as Mr. Golden said, we are encouraging folks to get out and volunteer in the schools. So if you would like to go help, we encourage you to wear the T-shirt, and so you will be clearly identified. Those of us at the central office who are also going out to volunteer have them as well. And we encourage you to show your WCS pride. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Birdsong. In a very short board chair report, I just want to echo that volunteer opportunities abound in our schools right now. And even if you work full-time, like most of us do, it's very easy to sign up and connect and serve lunch at one of our local schools. It's a lot of fun. It's great to be with the children and really great to see the love that our cafeteria staff and so many of our staff members show our children every day. So volunteer challenge before December. Love for everybody in the board to volunteer at one of their schools. So thank you. Moving ahead to new business, we are moving to COVID mitigation strategies. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I referenced the COVID mitigation strategies item on this agenda related to the attorney-client meeting we have and litigation counsel's recommendation that we defer this item until after further guidance from the court is received, with the caveat that they have a hearing this Friday, and there will be we anticipate that there will be an order subsequent to that.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve? Was that, okay. This is not for discussion. It's a motion. Okay. Okay. Mr. Galbraith?
Yes, I would, with all due respect to our advice, I would like to move that we remove the existing mask mandate as it currently stands.
Do we have a second? Mr. Cash seconds. Discussion? Mr. Wimberly?
I was prepared to make a motion. Huh? Do what? May I talk?
Yes.
I'm not sure where if I have the opportunity to make a motion now, but I was prepared to make one that in effect states that based on the recommendation of our litigation counsel, motion to defer the COVID-19 mitigation strategy discussion until our litigation counsel receives further guidance from the federal court.
So we do have a motion and a second on the floor. Do we have any further discussion on the current motion? Yes, Mr. Brown.
So we're on the original motion from Mr.
We are.
Galbraith?
Mhm.
Okay. So I would say two things. Our case count, if you just look at it statistically, is effectively zero. We would have to increase, we could still increase our case count significantly. We hope it doesn't happen, but it could happen. And if it did, we would still be effectively zero. When you think about 42,000, 43,000 students, less than 100 cases, it could increase substantially and still be effectively a zero percentage. That's one thing. The second thing is, thanks to the great work that our administrators and our teachers have been doing, and I sincerely mean that, this has been a hard work, and they've done a great job with the mitigation measures, with finding opportunities to address concerns from individuals who feel their children need to be receive special attention and deserve special attention. We've tried our best and taken great pains to do that. So with those things in mind, I support the motion.
Any other discussion, board members? So I guess, let's see, let me just take a quick look. No, there's no one else. Board members, please cast your votes. Yes to support Mr. Galbraith's motion. No if you do not support. Yes, Mr. Hall? Oh.
We have the motion, right?
Pardon me?
We have the motion, right?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Did you get the motion?
There you are. You're on.
Mr. Galbraith?
Just one moment, Mr. Mitchell. We've had a request to read the motion.
Mr. Galbraith made the motion to remove the existing mask mandate, and it was seconded by Mr. Dan Cash.
Board members, please cast your votes.
Can we get a recommendation from the superintendent on the motion?
Yes. Yes.
I'd recommended the advice from litigation counsel, so I cannot recommend this motion.
And can you repeat that advice from litigation counsel, please?
Litigation counsel recommended that we defer this item until after further guidance from the federal court is received.
And in as much as you are comfortable saying so, can you explain why litigation counsel made that recommendation, or can you not explain that? I'm getting a head nod from Dana on that one.
Correct. I think that Superintendent Golden has provided as much information as he ought to at this point.
Tiptoeing a little too close to that line. I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell, would you please cast your vote?
Yeah, I had tried to get in on the list for comments. Have the votes been cast?
Yes.
Okay.
Counted.
I vote in favor of the motion.
Your vote is 8 yes, 4 no.
Excuse me, my vote is incorrect. I voted no.
You can change her vote.
Okay, I'll check. So the vote is 7 yes, 5 no.
Thank you. Next item, items related to the 2021-2022 school board budget. Number 1 is the approval of the General Purpose School Fund SRO grant. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is approval of funding we've received from the state to help offset expenses for the third year for Creekside Elementary School, which is our newest school, so that there is a delay in the receipt for funding for SROs. Recommend approval.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Welch, do we have a second? Mr. Cash? Any discussion? I see no discussion. Board members, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
I vote in favor of the motion.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Okay, motion passes. Next item. Let's see. Approval of the General Purpose School Fund Tennessee Foundational Skills Curriculum Grant. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a $300,000 grant that we've been offered and based upon our doing some work with our teachers to help other state LEAs engage in phonics instruction. So we recommend approval of receipt of this grant.
Do we have a motion to approve? Ms. Emerson makes the motion, and Mr. Brown makes the second. Board members, any discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell.
I vote in favor of the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Our next item is approval of the General Purpose School Fund for Disproportionality. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is structured as 10% of the IDEA Part B funds, and it is year 3 of a requirement that we have to fund fund that percentage towards disproportionality related to school discipline. Recommend approval.
Board members, is there a motion to approve? Mr. Brown, is there a second? Mr. Welch, any discussion, board members? If not, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell, how do you vote?
I vote in favor of the motion.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Our next item is approval of the General Purpose School Fund, intercategory, page high. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Back about a year and a half ago, actually March of 2020, the County Commission funded a number of our items that were on the 5-year capital plan based upon the interest rate dropping very low, if I'm not mistaken, even below 1%. And that they made that decision for some of the page funding based on what was in our 5-year capital plan. Year and a half later, the bid came in just under $25,000. We were asking that you approve funding to complete the funding for the next phase at Page High School with the contingency funds that are available in our general funds. Recommend approval.
I'll make the motion to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Cash makes the second. Any discussion? If not, board members, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell? How do you vote?
I vote in favor of the motion.
Hold up, Nat.
Oh, yes.
There was somebody requested to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Too fast. Mr. Brown?
Clarification on the timeline for completion of that project.
Thank you. Mr. Samuels, this is actually the second to last phase, so I would like Mr. Samuels to speak to the detail.
One moment, Mr. Samuels. There you go.
This will be the third phase. This phase building will complete in August of 2023, and then we'll have one more phase that goes. So we bid it 2 Tuesdays ago, or the Thursday of the work session last week. So it's pretty fresh, and with your approval tonight, we'll have the ability then to proceed with the discussions with the contractor.
And if I may, Mr. Brown, this represents the second large development of the new classrooms. So we've done the first phase that really is the large portion of the classrooms. This will finish the main capacity for the new building.
And one more question, and this will add capacity, how much capacity to the school?
We are going from about 1,200 student capacity at Page to 2,000.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I see no further questions. Board members, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
I vote in favor of the motion.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Our next item is approval of the General Purpose School Fund buses.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is our annual request for replacement buses for our buses that have to roll out of service due to either age or mileage. Just as a FYI, we do have the power to extend the age of the buses up to 18 years upon a review from the Department of Safety those last 3 years. So we do recommend approval of this request.
Any discussion, board members? Mr. Hall? Mr. Hall makes the motion to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Wimberly? And now moving to discussion, Mr. Galbraith.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry. There.
Okay, thank you. So, Jason, I know we discussed this at length, and I had a good conversation with Mr. Samuels, who's provided some information. But can you help me out, because I'm having trouble with being down. The count is, I believe, 46 double routes. And honestly, without Mr. Samuels and I were talking, but we don't have any numbers, and we didn't have a chance to sit down kind of face to face and look at everything. I know the reality is you're trying to get ahead and want to, just with the supply chain stuff, is there any way that we can pull this for and pull this to January? Like, what would that do? Because here's my issue is we don't have enough bus drivers to drive the buses that we do have, and now we're trying to replace we're trying to replace buses that go out of service, and ordinarily that's not a big deal, but we also have a number of buses that are sitting there and not doing anything. And so and given that some of our buses we have to get rid of them by either age or mileage, and there's kind of it's an either or an and, I guess. But I struggle. I don't know. I don't have enough information to say that we need these buses or not. And so just wanted to get your thoughts on what it would look like to delay.
Well, number one, we try to be as efficient as we can in our bus purchases. We have a budgeted number of bus drivers, and as everyone knows, we are down below that. We also make sure that we have replacement and cycle fleet, so that when a bus is in the shop, we have a bus that's ready for that. Right, and then you factor in growth. That each year we project the need for growth buses. And we are actually not this year requesting any growth buses, even though we grew by a little over 1,800 students. That's in part because we know that we can't staff every single route.
It's also good because we had the same number of students 2 years ago.
Well, it's actually not the same number. We've actually grown by a net 600 or so over 2 years ago, and we've had some additional bus riders related to that. Special education is different.
No, I'm talking.
But we're talking general buses exclusively. So Mr. Samuels does have numbers related to that. And so, Mr. Samuels, if you would, answer Mr. Galber's question related to numbers.
You're on.
Thank you. We currently have 220 buses, general ed buses, and yes, there's 171 drivers, but we also have 46 second loads, which means the drivers we have to go back out and do another run, which basically means those students are getting to school late. If we had another 46 drivers, then we would fill those buses and none of those students would be late. We do have a certain percentage overall that we put in swing bus mode. We have 10 that are pre-staged at school, so in case a driver has a problem in the morning or the afternoon, quickly can go to close by bus. We have others that are in our compound of the transportation compound, which gets cycled through every day. Mr. Galbraith, I wouldn't characterize that we have buses that aren't really doing anything for the most part. We're cycling through that other 15 to 25 we need each day because of the maintenance cycles for those buses and the call-outs and stuff that we have. So long term, we will be in a position, I think, to draw down the number of buses we have. But right now, we've got a group of buses that, if we got more drivers, we got buses to put them in and still maintain the swing vehicles that we need. The swing vehicles is important because a little bit of history on what we've done. In the last few years, we've pulled in-house all bus maintenance with the exception of tires. You go back 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was quite the opposite. We were sending a lot of stuff out. We had a lot of buses would be out for over 2 weeks to 3 weeks. In some cases, tires, just to do tires, it was an extended period of time. We have improved that by a couple things. We've made investment in tools and equipment. We've made investment in the frankly, the salaries that we're paying some of the mechanics because of the training that they went to do turbocharger overhauls, to do transmission overhauls, to do the kind of stuff that we used to send out and have to wait and wait and wait for. Now we do those things in-house, and the downtime has been turned down to a number of days as opposed to a couple of weeks.
And Mr. Samuels, if you would answer that second question, Mr. Galbraith, about the schedule for purchasing.
If we were to delay, like what would that look like?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Till January.
I got excited about, explaining the great work that our transportation
We were
folks have been
excited
doing.
too for you.
I'm pretty sure the contract has already been let and the pricing has been received. So as soon as we get the money, we need to go ahead and do the purchases because the 21 buses that we need to replace are overaged, over miles, and we need those for August of this coming school year.
So if I may, Mr. Galbraith, related to your question, there is always a demand to get first in line. This is early compared to what we normally do. And your question was related to whether January would be an appropriate time. If my experience is, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, given the market right now, if a school system said, hey, listen, we don't want a bus, they'll find a buyer right now. But from a scheduling standpoint, our transportation director has told us because of the demands right now related to the supply chain, this is an appropriate time. And I think your question was, if we defer it till January, will that be a problem? Mr. Samuels, can you answer that question?
I just know in the general automotive industry right now, trying to get orders out and get slot times for new manufacturers is pretty tough. I would prefer not to wait.
So, Mr. Golden, from a county commission standpoint, if we, when do they get this with committees and what, when would they get this, and would we meet before ultimately it is approved by the county commission?
In every one of our meetings, when the board approves something, it goes to the county commission for the next meeting. So we don't have meetings scheduled before the county commission's next meeting based on our schedule.
And it's only one reading. It goes to the committee and then
correct.
it goes to the county commission. And when is that next
correct.
meeting? Is it
That's
December?
in January.
So they're meeting
Yeah,
in
they
January.
don't meet. They don't meet in
They meet in
December.
January, but they meet before we meet again.
That is correct.
Education Committee has already been set for the 22nd.
Of November?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and then the commission doesn't vote till January. To the core of your question about the numbers, we are actually below what would be optimal were we fully staffed and able to run every route without the double routes or the first and second loads.
And what does that mean below fully optimal? Because
If we were fully staffed and with enough drivers to run every single route, Mark, how many buses would that be?
252 buses if you add in the percentages that we need for the swings that we're doing right now.
So
We're only
Mark,
asking for 220.
subtract out the percentages for swings. How many actual routes for general ed buses?
That's 217.
217. We have 220 buses. If we are optimal, 217. So we have slowly reduced the last few years in knowing that we can't fully staff right now. So we're trying to be efficient with that. Could we get by with a couple fewer buses in the short term? Certainly.
yeah, that just, and this is just my difficulty not having the enough information, because with the information that that Mr. Samuels had sent to me, and I'm trying to apologize. I'm trying to find. I can't. I thought there were somewhat on the lines of 171 routes that were being run, and we have right about that in number of actual drivers, but then on a daily basis, we have fewer drivers than that have to drive that number. I didn't think it was anywhere near 220 routes that you had to run.
171 is actually his answer to your question about current.
Well, that's current bus drivers, but that's not the current number of bus drivers that drive every day.
I got you.
So we have fewer numbers than that, and I don't think they're driving 220 routes. I think they're driving in the 170 routes, right?
Am I still?
I know.
Yeah. Those 171 routes plus 46 second load routes. So that's where you get the 217. Those are being done every day as we speak now.
Okay. Again, I mean, you guys tell me if y'all are comfortable getting a bunch of school buses when we don't have enough school bus drivers to drive them. If y'all are okay with that, then you can go against my no vote. I'd like to defer and get some more information, but if everybody else is good with it, then go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Galbraith. We have reviewed this, and this year we've determined that it's appropriate to do a replacement of all those buses that are cycling out. We haven't done it every year, but this year we are recommending that.
Ms. Cleveland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Samuels and Mr. Golden already answered my question about the lag time for the ordering, between the time of ordering and when we would actually get the buses, so thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you. Mr. Golden, you said we haven't done it every year. When is the last time that the district did purchase buses?
We purchase annually. We have a cycle that we structure it so we don't have to buy a large number of buses any one particular year compared to each year. In the past, I can't speak to specifics as I sit here, but there have been times where we have reduced our number with the practical knowledge that, look, we're not going to be able to get that many drivers this year. So when Mr. Samuels tells you that if we were fully staffed and we're able to run every route regularly, we would have 252 buses, and yet we have 220. That reflects those decisions we've made over the years. I do know that our transportation office looks to the extent they can, make that rotation as even as possible, knowing that that's a 15 to 18-year window.
Is it, based on this recommendation, would it be projected then that next year we would need to purchase even fewer?
We would have to, number one, check on how many buses we were required to retire based on their schedules. And then we would evaluate where we are with staffing and evaluate growth. So one of the truisms we've experienced these last few years as licensed drivers, trucks, et cetera, are so hard to come by is we have slowly grown our total staff, but we have also grown with students. And so we're either holding our own or just catching up just a little bit. So it would vary depending on the particular year's retirements.
Thank you.
Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Mr. Golden, I'd just like to compliment Mr. Mark Samuels. They're doing a fantastic job, and what he's done with the maintenance crews and whatnot, and I remember the tire issues, getting them done, buses sitting down in certain areas, in the training the technicians and paying them some decent money for their knowledge base has worked. I've seen buses go down and minutes later another one shows up, and that's what we've got to have. I do understand what Jay's kind of saying though, but I think with the retirement of buses and whatnot, and hopefully we're going to get this hiring issue is going to get a lot better in the near future, so we'll be able to fill those buses. And but I did have one question for you, Mr. Golden, is how is the double routes affecting the tardiness of students? And how much instruction time are we losing there?
Well, first and second loads are generally aimed at those shorter routes, especially at the elementary levels, where we can schedule, at least on paper, well, when I say on paper, in our computer system, routes that will complete in time to get on time to school. So that depends on projected traffic. Every day, I think probably every day, there is a late bus for some reason. whether it's they hit unusual traffic or they get behind an accident, those kinds of issues. As we sit here, I don't have exact numbers, but it is a challenge. And especially right now where we don't have sufficient substitute drivers.
Yeah, I was just curious. Thank you.
And Mr. Cash, I do want to thank the board. A few years ago, you may recall that you voted for Mechanic 1 and Mechanic 2 position, and that's really helped with retention of those highly skilled mechanics.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm supportive of this funding. We don't need to take a risk of getting out of line for our replacement buses only to discover that getting back in line cost us 12, 15 months potentially. So I would ask Mr. Samuel, if we pass on this allotment that we would get, what's the possibility that we wouldn't be able to get back in line for the unforeseeable future given supply chain issues?
Sir, I don't think I can give you a high degree of accuracy on that. What I can say is supply chain issues and the backups that we're seeing in some of the contracting side of the house in terms of getting allotments for vehicles is unpredictable at this time. It's similar to what's happening in the construction industry as a whole. The best thing I can give you is it may not be that we would have the replacement buses by the time August comes around.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I'm supportive of this funding.
Board members, I don't see any other requests to speak. Please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell, how do you vote?
I vote in favor of the resolution.
Okay.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if I could change my vote. It was meant to be a no.
Your vote is 11 yes, 1 no.
Thank you.
I understand.
I know you do.
Thank you. Our next item is the approval of the General Purpose School Fund Intercategory Transfer Salary 2021-22. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the 4% raise approved by the school board, you all, and the county commission. It was approved in one line item, and our finance department is distributing it to all the appropriate line items. So we recommend approval of this.
Do we have a motion to approve? Mr. Welch motions. Mr. Haw makes the second. Any discussion, board members? I see no discussion requested. If so, please. Oh, Mr. Galbraith? No. Board members, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell, please cast your vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in favor of this motion.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Our next item is approval of education capital projects, Brentwood Middle School intent to fund. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the first significant investment in the replacement of the Brentwood Middle School building. Earlier, you all had approved a small amount of funding for the architectural work. This is to start the major phases. Recommend approval.
Motion to approve. Ms. Cleveland makes the motion. Mr. Galbraith makes the second. Any discussion, board members? Mr. Galbraith.
Thank you. Mr. Golden, can you tell us when we're going to have some public meetings about this? I remember back to the Brentwood High School big renovation and the Page High large campus renovation, as well as the Franklin one. Got a good bit of fanfare and public support behind it. We've been lucky enough to see the plans, and I don't know, they're constantly changing, and that staff has looked at them, and I think the school and staff have looked at them, and they're making some tweaks. But before it's finalized, I'd really love the opportunity for the public to, I mean, particularly obviously the Brentwood community to be able to see it. I'm super excited about it. It exceeded my expectations when I saw just some of the things that the architects through. I mean, with all of you guys leading the way to work on it, but I really want to have that sooner rather than later. I mean, we run the risk of by the time they get to it, it's going to be come Christmas time, and everybody's going to be busy, and so just.
Thank you for that. I think that's a great suggestion, and I do know that there's been some discussion with the PTO leaders about that as well. I will tell you one key point I think it's really important for us to communicate with the families is the schedule, right, and what that means from a phasing approach. So we'll have a conversation with Mr. Samuels and get something set up so that we can present that to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members. I see no other discussion. Board members, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell, how do you vote?
I vote to approve this motion.
Thank you. The next item is approval of education capital projects. Oh,
Haven't
I'm
voted.
sorry. I thought y'all had voted.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Board members, I apologize. I have one more technology input than normal tonight, and I think it's put me over the top. Our next item is approval of education capital projects, synthetic turf football fields intent to fund. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You all may recall that from the time Nolensville High School opened with a synthetic turf field, we initiated a phased approach for our schools. This is the final phase for all our comprehensive high schools to have the turf field. So we do recommend approval for funding this final phase. This represents Independence and Summit High Schools.
Okay. And Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to approve this funding.
Mr. Cash makes the second. Board members, is there any discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
I vote to approve.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Our next item is approval of education capital projects, transportation building, addition intent to fund. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an item that's been on the 5-year capital plan for expansion of the transportation building, really for offices. We had a discussion a couple of years ago about the dispatch area and how tight that was, how difficult it was for them to do that work. And so this is the funding for that, and we do recommend approval.
Have a motion? Mr. Wimberly makes the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Welch seconds. Board members, any discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I vote to approve.
Mr. Wimberly?
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
The next item is the approval of education capital projects, asphalt, roof, and WWTP intent to fund. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is our annual request that shows up on our 5-year capital plan and then ultimately goes for funding as we are working on tonight for asphalt roofs and wastewater treatment plant needs. We break that down between rural and general debt based upon elementary and middle schools versus high schools. And we do recommend approval, and Mr. Samuels is here if you have any specific questions.
Okay. Do you have a motion to approve? Mr. Cash makes the motion. Ms. Emerson seconds. Any discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I vote to approve.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Our next item is approval of the Education Capital Projects Fund for Page High School it's phase 3, correct?
That is correct.
Intent to fund, Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item is related to the next request related to continuing the project at Page High School. You see that the estimated completion cost is listed in the resolution. I will tell you that we're actually bringing this. It's actually phase 4. I apologize. It's the beginning money for phase 4. We're actually bringing this a little bit earlier than we traditionally do because of construction schedules. This is something we might typically bring to you in about March or so. So we do recommend approval for the initial work and getting the phase 4 started.
Motion to approve. Ms. Apria? Mr. Cash makes the second. Board members, any discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I vote to approve.
Mr. Brown?
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Our next item is an annual agenda item, the 5-year capital plan, 2021-2027. Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were, of course, a lot of funding resolutions. Many of those were based on prior year's 5-year capital plans that have adjusted from time to time. The 5-year capital plan includes planning that the commission looks at for their long-term planning related to land acquisitions, new school building construction, additions, major renovations, maintenance, and information technology capital, and transportation. I do want to point out that this year we have the IT capital is being added and has not been in the 5-year capital plan over the last few years. But based on a conversation I had with Mayor Anderson, we thought it was wise to include that so that the commission would have a grasp of the projection that we anticipate in that 5-year capital plan. You may also notice that there are some changes from last year, and Mr. Samuels actually in his memo included some examples, delayed the opening of the elementary school south until 2023, and middle school east Cox Road to 2026, and we actually pushed the proposed middle school on the Jordan Elementary School property from 2023 to 24. And we have some other changes related to that. This is, for us, a significant planning document, knowing that plans can change, that market conditions can change. As part of that, a lot of our numbers are higher this year than they were because market conditions have changed, and I want to thank Mr. Samuels and his team for working on that. So certainly open to any questions you may have, with a final comment that we will bring, when we determine it's appropriate, proposed funding items based on our draft schedules. And as always, that would take your approval and the commission's approval when those times come. Recommend approval.
Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Welch makes the motion. Mr. Haw makes the second. Board members, any discussion? 5-year capital plan. Mr. Galbraith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Trying to make sure I comment on everything. Just kidding, of course. Jason, we had a had a good conversation, and we and continue at the work session. I thought, I guess after our conversation this morning, I appreciate Mr. Samuels and Allison kind of walking me through some of the details, and I think my recommendation, if it's appropriate, is to take this process up through policy. I think part of the reason that part of my hesitation at the work session and then now is that we're seeing new projects on here, which is not entirely unreasonable given the growth, but there's no context, and I know we do. You have bigger planning documents, but I think what I'd like to discuss with the board what we would like to see in this document and before we approve a 5-year capital plan. I don't think that any of us are qualified to answer the questions that I know some of the commissioners are going to have before they vote on this. And I get that they're really just voting on year one, things that that are on there, and the rest of it is not any commitment on their part or on our part. But I would really like us to think long and hard of the board's role in producing this document. And at a minimum, I think I'd like to propose that we make this a 2-reading event rather than a single. We're getting this on Tuesday and we're talking about it on Thursday night and then we're voting on Monday. Or maybe we got it on Monday, but still we had 4 days to review and very little opportunity to talk to staff about this, as well as we could define, because what I would like to see, as we discussed a little bit today, is the capacity planning on these schools. It was noted by a board member that me or maybe just anybody who questions things around the planning or rezonings, says that we don't want to, or I'll just say that I don't want to rezone, and that really couldn't be further from the truth. I want a plan, and I want to see a long-term plan, and if things happen that the plan doesn't work out because growth doesn't happen exactly like we say, then we pivot from the plan, but at least we can explain. And when schools open up, there's a reasonable expectation, and we had some good conversations about things that we can do in the interim, potentially to push back the building of a school by a year or two, or to bring one forward, and what those things might look like. So I mean, ultimately, given what's in year one, I have one question, because we didn't talk, or at least I don't remember us talking about the Early Childhood Development Center. Did we talk about that on Thursday, or maybe can you talk about that? It's been on there. I think it's been off. I can't remember. It's kind of on again, off again relationship. But are we actually recommending that we create a standalone EC center?
So you're right that it has been off and on, and we have had from time to time discussions about it. The idea behind it is that in a time of growth in certain of our more densely attended areas, could we have an early childhood center for early childhood and potentially pre-K as well, to give additional capacity at some of our elementary school buildings? So the one we talked about most over the past few years is Longview Elementary School, because Longview has the same capacity as any other elementary school, but if I'm not mistaken, maybe 4, maybe 6 classrooms are actually being used by early childhood program. So what's on paper is not its actual capacity. So we've in that example, we've talked about bus transportation for those youngest children and how far someone might have to travel. So ultimately, we did put on the 5-year capital plan an early childhood center, especially in that Spring Hill area. Might one be able to go in the Nolensville area over time with growth as that area grows, perhaps. So to your larger question about planning, I certainly welcome that discussion. From the potential of a policy committee discussion. We do spend many months internally, administratively talking about these items, and it's a mix of intentional plan schedules and those conversations with city planners that just happen on a day-to-day basis. So if it's the will of the board, I certainly welcome us talking about this earlier and preparing. And I will say, the more we talk about it, the more the commission's going to know, right? Because ultimately, they're the ones that we ask for funding. So I'm certainly open to that.
Okay. Well, I was just sitting here in light of the other conversations about capacity and feeders and how elementary schools and middle schools and high schools fit together in a cohesive plan. Pulling those EC people out. Depending upon the planning that we did to figure out how big our elementary schools need to be and how big our middle schools and high schools need to be, like it might overload those, and I don't know what that's going to look like, right? It might actually right size them so that it feeds correctly, but it might actually have some unintended consequences on what the ultimate feeder pattern looks like, and therefore, like, we might have an elementary school that doesn't have a place to go except for like a high school way further out. So.
Well, thank you for that, and that is true. Feeder patterns are a challenge in a growth area, and to the extent we can, we want to keep those clean feeder patterns. As you all know, and many of our zones are split. That tends to vary just a little bit from time to time as grade levels are different, especially in high growth areas. Traditionally, and I know Ms. Nunley and our staff talk about this, when we have a high growth area, traditionally parents arrive with children in the younger grades, and then they, of course, within just a few years matriculate on up to the middle school. But you're right that the capacities can have an impact on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Wimberly.
I have a tendency to agree with Mr. Galbraith. It does seem like this year that although we spent a pretty good bit of time on it, but I recall work sessions in the past where we talked about nothing but the 5-year plan and perhaps multiple work sessions. And I'm not so sure that we need to change the policy. I'm not sure this is a policy matter. But, and I support us moving forward with this. But it seems like it might be better in the future if we could get it in sooner or in pieces that we can digest and go over, and Mark did a great job summarizing, no doubt about that. But it just seems like we could spend more time on some of the individual items. I was caught up a little bit off guard about a change in the location of the high school. And I think we spent 30 seconds at my request.
Thank you.
Not that Jay had talked about other things, but so I think in the future that I think we can do a better job on this personally.
Thank you. We also have it on our annual agenda, so we'll talk about moving it maybe even a little earlier on the annual agenda to give additional time.
And I almost dared to suggest that we have a work session specifically on the 5-year plan like we do the budget.
And I will just remind board members that this is a agenda item for the county commission in January. So to your point, we may want to look at moving it to an October work session or meeting, knowing that the commission will vote on it in January.
Okay.
Mr. Brown?
This is really more clarification for me as the new guy. What exactly are we being asked to vote on with this item?
You are being asked to vote on the document itself, no funding. The county commission, this originated many years ago with the county commission and their bond structure needing a document for planning purposes that they would present to bond ratings. For us, it became something much more to help us with planning so that we could project, and I think for the commission as well, that over time, they like to project out and see what we anticipate. And so, but ultimately, to answer your question, you're not voting on any funding. You're just voting on this document being sent on to the commission for their review in January.
And if I may, the commission uses it for bond preparation, overall debt, as well as privilege tax information. So we have to have this document voted on, presented to the commission so that the commission can then, it's a requirement for collection of that.
So it needs to be fairly definitive if they're going to the financial markets with it.
It traditionally has been a forecast, so that yes, it is, but it is a piece in the structure that the county wants for bond market.
I'm going to abstain just simply because I don't have enough information based on my time on the board to really vote in favor of $650 million of projected funding, but I'm not opposed to it necessarily.
Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to make sure I'm understanding, to kind of piggyback on Mr. Brown's question, this is strictly a planning document. We could submit an intent to fund, I guess, motion with that was not included on the 5-year plan if we so thought it necessary and the urgency was there. Is that a true statement?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so it doesn't have any teeth. It doesn't prevent us from making adjustments. It just kind of gives, and I guess the other point is that the county doesn't go to the bond market every year. That's I think typically something they do every few years, but it is strictly just a planning document, not something that restricts us based upon what's on it or what is not on it.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. That is correct. As to their bond, as to the county going to the bond market, I have seen some years where they've gone twice in a year. I've seen some years where they haven't gone, and I think it really depends on their analysis of the need, what funds they have available, interest rates, many factors that they consider on that.
Mr. Wimberly?
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay, I see no further discussion. Board members, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
I vote to approve. Thank you.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no, 1 abstain.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda are board policies for first reading. The first item is policy 6.411, student wellness, and this is a new policy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Ms. Osbrooks explained at the policy committee and the board work session, this is a new policy pursuant to state law. This is first reading, and we do recommend your approval on first reading.
Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Haw, a second. Mr. Welch seconds. Board members, any discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I vote to approve.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thanks. The next item is policy 4.214, virtual education program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the Policy Committee, this was presented as a compliance piece of language related to the state standards for students participating in a virtual education program as opposed to a virtual school. And so based on that, we do recommend approval of this language. And it is, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm looking for a nod from Ms. Osbrooks, is it specifically related to the COVID standards?
Yes, it is specifically related to quarantine.
Okay, thank you. So based on the rules of the State Board of Education, we do recommend approval of that.
Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Haw, is there a second? Mr. Welch? Any discussion, board members? I see no discussion. Board members, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I vote to approve.
Thank you. The next item is the approval of the 2022, I'm sorry, did I go ahead? Sorry.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
All right. The next item is the approval of the 2022-23 school calendar. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is, this calendar, this proposed calendar is the product of a committee's work based upon the discussion the board had just a few months ago about not setting a particular parameter for the calendar, but discussing how well things went, at least in the early stages of this year, based on the calendar, especially related to the fall break. Did want to point out a couple of items, maybe just one. Something that jumped out at me when I first reviewed the work was the teacher day in December after the students left for winter break, and it's a Monday only. Just as a reminder, the plan based on the conversations with the Williamson County Education Association is that will be a flex day where teachers could put that time in over the course of the year in the event they did not want to be working in their building that particular day. So based on the recommendation of the calendar committee, I do recommend approval and thank that group for their work.
Motion to approve? Ms. Emerson makes the motion. Is there a second? Oh, Mr. Galbraith makes the second. Board members, any discussion? I don't see any discussion. Board members, if you'll please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
Madam Chair, I vote to approve.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. The next item is approval of school board norms, board policy 1.107, and this is an annual agenda item as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a standard of norms that you all set for each other, and I know that you, Madam Chair, had solicited any input from board members related to any proposed changes based on the discussion at the work session. I'm not aware of any proposed changes, so I do recommend approval.
Do we have a motion to approve? Mr. Wimberly? Do we have a second? Ms. Apria? Board members, any discussion? Any discussion? If not, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I vote to approve.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. The next item is also an annual agenda item. It's the approval of the Code of Ethics for School Board Members, which is Board Policy 1.2.021, annual agenda item. Go ahead, Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is actually listed in your packet with a blue line, Code of Ethics, being changed to Code of Conduct for school board members. And I may be speaking for you, Madam Chair, but you did a little research related to the Code of Ethics, which is structured for financial issues and is located in a different spot in the policy manual versus the Code of Conduct for school board members. And we recommend a change in the title based upon that, and the additional feedback that you all gave at the work session. So based on that, certainly recommend approval based on what I heard from the board at the work session.
Thank you. I'll make the motion to approve. Is there a second? Ms. Emerson? Any discussion, board members? I will say that this change brings this policy in line with the suggested policy title that is used statewide at this time. If there's no further discussion, board members, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I vote to approve.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. The next item is the approval of the WCS online school names. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This non-traditional process of naming an online school was brought to you by the committee following the policy governing the naming of schools. So with this committee chose to make a recommendation including 3 possible names with actually an emphasis on their preferred name, both for our K-8 online school and our 9 through 12 online school. So with that, with the committee's recommendations, I do recommend that you approval the K-8 online school name to be Discovery Virtual K-8 School, and the 9 through 12 online school to be named Vanguard Virtual High School.
Yes. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to place the motion that we name the K-8 school Discovery Virtual School.
Mr. Welch, is that a second, or? Mr. Welch makes the second. Any discussion, board members?
What about the other school? There's just one. It's on the agenda once.
Well, that is correct. Mr. Galbraith made a point of order. My recommendation is for both schools. If we have one vote, I'll defer to you, Ms. Osbrooks, about it being on one.
Since it's one agenda item, we need one vote. So both. I did not hear from Mr. Mitchell both names.
I can modify my motion to that point. I was thinking that we would do two votes, one for the K-8 and one for the 9 through 12. But with your point of order, I'll modify my motion I move that we name the K-8 school Discovery Virtual K-8 school, and that we name the 9 through 12 school Vanguard Virtual High School.
Mr. Welch continues his second. Board members, any discussion? Mr. Welch, do you want to discuss this?
No, I was planning to make the same motion.
Okay, thank you. I'll clear. Mr. Galbraith.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate my request to review this policy, and I actually written it down Thursday night, and I cannot place it, but the school naming policy, we pulled it up and looked at it on Thursday, but so since we basically, in the definition of the committee, that the duties of the committee, we essentially pulled out any reference in the current policy to whether the committee, the naming committee, would would actually make a recommendation towards, or just list the 3 schools that are the 3 names that are, that they would recommend. So in our 2 times since we've done this, since we reviewed this policy twice, actually, over a 6-month period, one time they've made a recommendation, the other time they haven't. And any time when we have policy that is vague and actually creates more questions than answers, then I probably misspoke, and I apologize if anybody took it as though anybody was doing anything wrong I said they violated policy. Upon further review, from my perspective, we just exposed the lack of clarity in the policy, and so I think the board needs to review this to determine what we want the policy to say, and I think we should decide if they should make a recommendation or not. So I'm supportive of the committee did a great job. I'm fine with the names, and looks like they, and the explanations went through a great deal of work, and I appreciate that. And I actually, and I like getting the recommendation of the committee personally, because otherwise we try to replicate all the work that they did, and we can't possibly do that at this meeting. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Wimberly?
I'm going to agree with Mr. Galbraith again. About every time we've named a school in the last 10 years, I brought up the same thing. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a committee that gives you 3 names. The committee makes a recommendation. We don't have to take the recommendation, but the committee should make a recommendation and not throw out 3 names.
Thank you. We'll make sure to put that on the policy committee agenda.
Thank you.
Board members, I don't see any other requests for discussion. Please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I vote to approve both names.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Next item, appointment of the Pekka Special Question Committee. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned at the work session, there's a peculiarity in the Pekka law that actually has a special question committee that actually calls for an equal number of board members and representatives from the Education Association. The gist of what they do is just oversee an already defined series of questions that must be asked related to teacher selection of that process. So do recommend approval of you and Ms. Leanne White, the current president of the Williamson County Education Association, to be that committee. Recommend approval.
Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Apria makes the motion. Ms. Emerson makes the second. Any discussion, board members? I see no discussion. Board members, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
Madam Chair, I vote to approve.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board members. Our final agenda item for tonight is the recommendation to support the City of Spring Hill in renaming Twin Lakes Drive to Austin's Way. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mitchell brought this to the board after discussions with some of the elected officials in the City of Spring Hill, and they have been having a discussion about how to honor Austin Corbett. And one strong possibility that they're going to consider is renaming Twin Lakes Drive, or at the least a segment of Twin Lakes Drive, as currently constructed, Austin's Way. And based on the board work session discussion, I prepared a draft letter that we have included in your packet that in the event you vote yes, I will add the vote to that letter and send that on to Mayor Hageman. And I want to mention a couple of things, if I may. In my letter speaks of this. Austin was beloved at Summit High School. He was a Transition 2 student who graduated just a couple of years ago. He passed away. He and his mother actually both passed away, and his family was well known in the community. And I have a lot of respect for the City of Spring Hill leaders and their discussion about how to go about honoring Austin. This is ultimately not your decision, but the City of Spring Hill representatives asked for your thoughts, and so certainly recommend approval. That in the event they decide this, we support this. Out of respect for us, they had some concerns as to what this might mean for us with a name change to a road because of the address will change. And frankly, from a chief executive's position, we're going to be fine. If anytime they want to do something to honor their citizens, we'll certainly support that, and especially this example with Austin.
Mr. Mitchell, do you want to make the motion to approve?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move to approve this recommendation.
Mr. Cash makes a second. Any discussion, board members? Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank Mr. Mitchell for bringing this to the board. And this is a really good example of working with local elected officials in the communities. So I also applaud, as Mr. Golden did, the Spring Hill elected officials who are advocating for this as well. So thank you.
Ms. Cleveland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to, this is for the public, that to make sure they realize that this is great that we're doing this for Austin, and it's immortalized, and in a town he loved and people loved him. But the people need to understand this vote only gives our approval to include our names into the letter into Spring Hill, for Spring Hill, showing our support. But renaming of the streets is under the jurisdiction of Spring Hill, and this in no way, the board has no authority to approve or disapprove the renaming. We are just voting to support Spring Hill in the naming.
Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate comments from my peers, and Ms. Cleveland is correct that this is just a request from the city that we also indicate our support of this move, and that's why I have brought it forward. So I respectfully ask everyone to support this recommendation of Mr. Golden sending a letter of support to the City of Spring Hill's Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, if I may, since there's no other board members listed, it says Austin's Way without an apostrophe, and that is deliberate because it's our understanding from the city that road names do not have apostrophes.
That's true. That's not the United States Postal Service doesn't allow punctuations within mailing addresses, I guess is the.
Suddenly Thompson Station's making a lot of sense. Board members, if there are no further questions or comments, please cast your votes. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I vote to approve.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board members. I think our voting devices have told us that it's time to end our meetings for the semester. They need some fresh batteries. So board members, thank you so much for your work. And I just want to close out our last meeting of this calendar year just by saying a thank you to all of our teachers and our staff and all the people who give so much every day to our students. Thank you, and this meeting's adjourned.